Hi everyone, welcome to Join 2021. Wish I could be in person with you all, but in lieu of that, I'm really excited to take you through our cloud cost management solution. By means of introduction, my name is Jesse Sherb. I've been on the Looker customer engineering team for about 4 years now, and this year in particular, I've been focusing on building point solutions for our enterprise customers. And in particular, we're going to talk through the cloud cost management solution today. So very quickly, just to go through an agenda, I will walk you through an overview of the solution, the problems we're trying to solve for. We'll talk about implementation options and how to move forward with implementing the solution for your own enterprise. And then we'll wrap up with a quick demo of the solution within Looker as well. I want to first start by talking about the high-level problems that we're trying to solve for with the cloud cost management solution. In interacting with our few first large customers who wanted to implement this solution, we've pretty much summarized the problem statement as the following. When it comes to effective cloud cost management or analytics in the public clouds, so GCP, AWS, and Azure, out of the box within any of these consoles, there's relatively low visibility, meaning there is not deep level reporting or the granular level of reporting that enterprises desire. As a result, enterprises start to look for other third-party softwares to address these needs. And what makes it increasingly more difficult is that each of these clouds build differently, right? They have different concept of credits and commits, on demand versus reserved resources or projects. And so when you're trying to get an apples to apples comparison across the three, again, that is a pretty difficult task to accomplish. To answer a basic question like, how much are my teams spending on all services across public clouds related to machine learning or to security, is taking somebody hours of manual reconciliation work in Excel each billing period. And then lastly, there is no lack of alignment out of the box to your own enterprise's cost centers. So if we want to answer a similar question to say, how much have my marketing and sales teams cost me over the last quarter across the three public clouds? Again, this tends to be a manual reconciliation process. And so the solution that we're going to go through today is designed to attack these problems head on. So I think the lowest hanging fruit here that we're trying to address at first is providing that higher level of visibility. So finally, just having a centralized place where we can look at all of our expenditures and all of our billing across the three public clouds. From there, we go through a process of data harmonization. So mapping similar services across the three clouds. For example, understanding that PubSub in GCP is the same thing or similar to Amazon notification service, and that rolls up into the category of data analytics. And now we can finally start to categorize our spend in a meaningful way. And then the last piece of this is that custom mapping. So whether your organization is using tags or labels or project names or billing accounts to identify who owns which expenditures across the three public clouds, or which teams are consuming services across the three clouds, we will work with you to create that mapping process. And more importantly, to create a scalable and automated process moving forward to report at that cost center level. And so that brings me into the different implementation options for the cloud cost management solution. So I'm about to walk you through three different versions that we have. And what I'll say is that these versions are not mutually exclusive, right? They build on top of each other in terms of complexity. The goal here is we want to be able to provide you something on day one, out of the box, and from there, as your appetite for your cost management analytics grows, the solution can grow with you. And so in version one, we're really just tackling that low-hanging fruit that I mentioned previously in that centralized visibility, right? So in this version, the data remains in each respective cloud. Looker is cloud agnostic, meaning Looker can connect to data sources in AWS, in GCP, in Azure, and we can provide a centralized reporting view of all of your expenditures across the three. In version 2, you'll see this is tagged as an advanced solution, right? This is where we're going to do a little bit more prerequisite work ahead of Looker, ahead of implementing the Looker solution, and that's going to include centralized storage of our billing data. So getting all of that billing data to sit in BigQuery within GCP. We'll undergo the harmonization of that data. So like I'd mentioned, not just getting it at the same level so that we can make easier apples to apples comparisons across the three data sets, but going through that harmonization process, going through the mapping of services, resources, similar SKUs, etc. And in the last version here, you'll see it's tagged bespoke solution. And what we realized very quickly in developing this solution, and where Looker strongly differentiates from point solutions or other SaaS softwares that are trying to address a similar problem, is that at some point when it comes to your cloud cost management, every enterprise is going to fork and have their own nuances and their own requirements for how they want to report on this information. And so just by the nature of this use case, it becomes a bespoke solution in which we want to hand you the keys to the car post-implementation so that you can really build this solution out to spec. And so in this version 3, this is where we are going to work with you through a services engagement to properly create that mapping to your call centers or to your teams within your organization that are incurring cost across 2 or 3 public clouds. Once we're at the call center level, well, now we can start to unlock additional value. For example, we can now forecast spend at the call center level. We can do things like budget tracking if you've set budgets for your call center owners. We can provide showback or chargeback support to start to create more accountability and more automation in the way that we bill our internal call center owners for their cloud expenditures. And as well, like I mentioned earlier, supporting your tags, your labels, your project names, making sure that everything is clean and organized for you to be able to report on that properly. Before I move into the next few slides, I do want to first start by talking about one of Looker's key differentiators, and that is our architecture. So as I mentioned on a previous slide, Looker connects to up to 50 different SQL dialects and is completely cloud agnostic. So if you have data sources in GCP, in BigQuery, Looker natively connects to that. But Looker can also connect to environments such as a Redshift environment or an Athena environment in AWS, a SQL Server or SQL Data Warehouse environment in Azure, among many others, as I mentioned. Looker then provides a middleware, a semantic data model that sits between the data source and the front-end user experience. And this data model allows us to codify our business logic so that our front-end users can explore that data freely in a governed way and in real time. So the most common way that we see this information surfaced to our front-end users is through the modern BI application provided by Looker. And the solution I'm about to walk you through is built on that BI application through a mechanism that we call Looker Blocks. Looker Blocks are pre-templated data models and dashboards and reports related to common use cases or common data sources that we see. But other ways that we see organizations using Looker to create this data-driven culture is one, through integrated insights. So using Looker to integrate with other first-party and third-party applications that might be relevant to driving decision-making, and I'll get into that a bit in our demo. Creating data-driven workflows. So as I mentioned, all of this information in Looker is in real time. So whether that's creating operational workflows, alerting, anything that we would like to automate on behalf of the information we're looking at, we have the ability to do so in Looker. And then lastly, Looker can also be used to build full-on bespoke applications. So whether we're using Looker as an API or using our iframe embed functionality, organizations can build complete custom first-party applications powered by Looker. And so that will segue into how each of these versions are implemented or how each of these versions are architected. So in version 1, as I mentioned earlier, there is no data egress, there is no data movement. Looker is simply connecting to each respective data source, each public cloud in this case, and presenting that billing data in a centralized view. So again, on day 1, we want to be able to unlock the ability to just have centralized reporting across your cloud expenditures. In version 2, we'll work with you to move your data or centralize your billing data into BigQuery so that we can start to undergo that harmonization process. So we can create a unified billing schema so we can speak the same language across the 3 different billing sets, as well as undergo that mapping process I had mentioned earlier of similar services so that we can start to properly categorize our spend. And lastly, in version 3, as I mentioned earlier, this is really where we start to move more into a bespoke solution. And in particular, this is where we're going to work with you so that we can properly map at that cost center level and really create alignment with your cloud billing and your organizational expenditures. So in this case, again, all of that data will be living in BigQuery, but now we will go through the rest of that data harmonization process. We will start to apply things like BigQuery ML to do forecasting at the cost center level. And as I mentioned, that will also allow us to do things like budget tracking, showback, chargeback, support, etc. So now the fun part. I'm going to walk you through the solution within Looker. And I'm going to start here on what we call our Cloud Cost Management Board. And this is really just a collection of content, dashboards, and reports pertaining to the Cloud Cost Management solution in this case. And so whether you are spending on all 3 public clouds, 2 of the public clouds, even just 1 of the public clouds, there is content here that is going to be relevant to you in your organization. So within this board, there's a few sections I want to walk you through. There's a multi-cloud section, which is where we'll start today on the demo, where we'll have all of our reports related to looking at information across the 3 public clouds. This does assume from the version list of implementations that we talked about a moment ago, this does assume that you have at least version 2 implemented. There is then a collection of GCP reports, AWS, and Azure specific dashboards as well. And so we're going to get started here on the multi-cloud summary. And what this dashboard is going to provide is pretty self-explanatory, but a summary of our cost expenditures across the 3 public clouds. And so what we can see here, and for many, this will be the first time that we can actually just see a total cloud cost over, in this case, the last 90 days, could be over the last billing period. We'll also then see a breakdown of these costs amongst the 3 different clouds, starting with GCP, Azure, and AWS. And we can also get a sense of what this looks like on a rolling daily basis. As you can see, we can also start to incorporate things like our budgets for the organization within these dashboards and reports. And before I move on, I just want to point out the filters that are available to us at the top of this dashboard. So like I said, we can change the time frame in which we're looking at this for. Now that we've gone through that data harmonization, we can start to properly categorize our spend. So we can say, hey, show us the same analysis for all services consumed related to machine learning or related to storage. We can filter on particular products and services across the clouds. We can even start to filter on individual cost center owners. So like I had mentioned, we want to see the same analysis for all expenditures by our marketing and sales teams over the last billing period. We can easily filter to do so. And keep in mind within Looker that these filters you're seeing can be applied on the front end like we're looking at here, or they can be applied automatically based on the user who's logging in. So if I'm Jane, cost center owner of the marketing and sales teams, when I log in, I will default to only seeing the information relevant to me and my teams. As we scroll down the dashboard, we get to this breakdown section. And as simple as these charts look, this is where I tend to get the feedback from customers that, oh wow, doing something as simple as a stack ranking of billed services across the 3 clouds is currently taking somebody hours of manual Excel work each billing period. And we'll start here at the most macro level, so the top service categories our teams are consuming. Then we'll go to the individual products and services across the 3 clouds that we're consuming. Then we'll tie this to the cost center owner, so which of our cost center owners are spending the most across the public clouds. And then lastly down to the resource level, so the resource or resource group level in AWS and Azure, and down to the project level within GCP. The next section is going to allow us to monitor our largest expenditures period over period. So I call it areas to watch, but we can do this in a number of ways. We can do it by products that we're consuming, cost centers, and even down to that resource project level. And what each of these bubbles represents is a different expenditure. In this case, we're looking at GCP compute engine. And the size of the bubble is going to indicate how large that expenditure is on a quarterly basis. So we can see here, we're spending over $18 million a quarter on GCP compute engine, and this is up 8.5% from the previous quarter, so in a relatively healthy range. So in the case of doing this analysis at the cost center level, it also will help us identify cost center levels that are perhaps spending a lot more this period than they were last period. So in this case, we can see our product development team is up 16% from the previous quarter to date. And this is a pretty sizable expenditure, over $5 million. So this is certainly something that we want to either investigate further or at least keep an eye on for future to make sure that that cost doesn't get out of control. And so within Looker, any of these data points that we see on any of these charts, we can click on if we want to investigate further. So unlike other BI visualization tools that you might be familiar with, Looker is just fundamentally approaches the dashboard a bit differently. So we want to treat the dashboard as a jumping off point for data exploration, not the end all be all. And so like we just saw, as I click on product development and we scroll up, well, now the entire dashboard is going to be filtered to just that cost center. So we can see in this period how much we've spent from our product development team. We can see what that looks like on a daily basis. We can see the services that were being consumed and the resources that were consuming those services, or in this case, the projects. We can even drill further if we wanted to see a particular anomalous day, like here on the 26th, we had a spike in our spend for product development. We can even get down to that exact day to see exactly what those expenditures were. From here, there's other ways we can start to interact with this dashboard. So we can set up alerts on any of the tiles that we're seeing. And again, going back to how Looker is architected, these are real-time alerts. Meaning, if I come in here and say, if my teams ever spend above 95,000, or my product development team rather, in a given day, I want that cost center owner to be notified immediately. Or I want the central FinOps team to be notified immediately upon that happening. Not a week, not a month after we've already gone over our budget. And perhaps the most powerful way that an end user can start to interact with this information is through a feature that we call exploring from here. And again, this is available on any tile you see on a Looker dashboard, and this is going to allow our users to have a point-and-click environment for them to ask further questions of the data. So as we see here, we bring this chart into this sandbox environment. Again, we call this our Explore environment. And on the left-hand side, we have all of the different data points that have been codified for us that we can start to include in our query, in our report, to again, perhaps investigate further or ask further questions of the data rather. So maybe I do want to find which of these projects is the culprit for that 16% increase this quarter that we've seen. And so I can do things like bring in a time frame, and we want to look quarter to date again. And we can bring in the period to get a period over period view. And once we run this, Looker will rerun that query, send it to the database, and surface these results in real time. So let's go add some value labels to make it a bit more clear. And we can see it is in fact this project black hole that had nearly a 700,000 increase from one quarter to the next. And so now we've identified why we saw that 16% increase, and we can reach out to the cost center owner with more information. All right, some other reports that are available to us that I'd like to cover here in this short demo with you. So perhaps one of the main requirements that I hear from customers is, okay, this is great that we can get reporting at the cost center level. But what we really love is to be able to provide that showback capability, or even start to automate the chargeback capabilities to our internal cost center owners. And we want to be able to create that accountability every billing period in an automated fashion. And so what we're looking at here is a report that allows us to do just this. We can filter on a particular cost center, in this case customer hosting, and we can see an itemized breakdown for everything that cost center owner, or I should say every expenditure that cost center owner has incurred over the last billing period. And we can see this across the 3 clouds. And so there's 2 different ways that we can think about creating this showback process. We can either have this exact report get sent to each cost center owner at the end of every period, and from here they can log into the Looker UI, they can explore from here and ask further questions of these expenditures like we just saw a moment ago. Or we can also start to bring these workflows outside of Looker. And so if we come up to this gear wheel and we click send, and all of this can be scheduled as well, we're going to see a number of destinations that we can send this information to. And these destinations are customizable. You can add any third-party or even first-party application you'd like to be able to go and send this data, or to automate a workflow or automate a task. So an example of this, I've actually seen customers implement integrations with NetSuite or with SAP, where they're executing the chargeback invoices and they're having Looker initiate that process. Now, a more simplified view of this is this data action that we call create chargeback invoice. From here, we would OAuth in with our Google Drive credentials. And what Looker is going to do is it's going to generate a Google document with that exact itemized breakdown, a summary at the top, and now this is something that can get dropped into a folder, so we can create a history of documentation for these showbacks, and it can automatically get emailed to each respective call center owner at the end of each billing process. And so the combination of this report and this chargeback invoice data action, as we call it, is really creating that level of accountability that customers are looking for. And so as I mentioned at the onset, we also have deeper level reporting for each respective cloud. So if we're trying to go a mile deep into any one of our clouds, we have the ability to do so. In this example, we're leveraging the cost optimization recommendations export from GCP. And here we can see individual changes we can make, whether that's downsizing a particular VM, what the total cost savings will be as a result, and if we were to perform all of these actions, what the total net savings would be. And doing that same analysis for persistent disks as well. And lastly, I do want to tease our most recent feature that I'm very excited to show as part of our version 3 deployment, and that is going to be forecasting at the cost center level. And so here's a sneak peek of what this is going to look like. Again, for any particular cost center, we can now see the historical cost of that cost center. We can see the forecast moving forward, as well as an upper bound and a lower bound for that forecast. These forecasts are built on BQML, and in particular, their ARIMA Plus block. And this is going to allow us to not only look at future forecasts and start to tie that against our budgets to see when perhaps we may go above our budget for a given period, but it also allows us to look at things like actuals versus forecast for historical data as well. All right, that is everything I had to show you today. Thank you so much for joining our Join 2021 session on cloud cost management. If you have any questions whatsoever, just reach out to your Looker account executive and they'll be able to point you in the right direction. Have a good one. Bye.